saying? People who don't know what's going on don't know whether you know what's going on or not either. But that doesn't matter. Well, at least not to someone who actually knows what's going on. And the viewer thinks, was that supposed to be some sort of test or something? And did I fail it by asking? In another reality, the mystical approach was divided into two paths. And in that particular instance were known as the glue way and the grease way. A viewer writes, after hearing you define stupidity as failing to realize one's potential, it struck me that in that setting, we do have a right to feel angry at men's stupidity. And operating on that assumption, I came up with a speculative course one might go through in this regard. Speculates I. That at first, stupidity makes a man mad. Then it begins to make him chuckle with resignation, and finally it just begins to make him weary. What do you think? Is it just my mental? It is just my mental meanderings, but what do you think, huh? Yours, etc. A neuron lad asked his metagnostic-styled dad, explain to me what it would be like to know the secret. And his papa replied, okay, it'd be like this. It'd be like you find some magic wheat that no one else and you started eating it just as fast as you can until you begin to swell up and get so large that you finally disappear. Wow, said the kid. The simple feel it their daily duty to critically comment on the obvious as though it were obscure. Until you understand the mind's conception of what birth is, you'll believe that most of your problems attach to you after yours. Those who think that their porch was polyurethane postpartum have grave difficulty ever lifting their feet therefrom. All right, I will. Those who think their porch was polyurethane postpartum have grave difficulty ever lifting their feet therefrom. Ordinary people try to solve their problems, while mystics attempting to abandon them for the illusionary rusty cars that they are sitting immobile in their front yard. Interrogatories in the key of, ooh, looky here. It's good we have some musical scholars in the house. Does calling a worm an eagle make it fly? Does labeling life reality make it so? Okay, before we go to a station break, a quick quiz. What is stupider than being stupid? Well, we got to go, so I'll have to give you the answer. What is stupider than being stupid is trying to tell the stupid that they are. Okay, we'll be right back after these dumb words from your dumb broadcaster. And out there, somewhere, a viewer turned to his wife and says, but Gladys, if I like it, it's not dumb, is it? No, George, she assured him, it's not dumb. The king called in his high sheriff and asked, how many arrests have you made today? And the royal enforcer replied, none, your grace. So far, no one in the kingdom has committed an untoward act. And the king slapped him across the head. You dunce, you haven't been watching again. And so it goes in the land of, I'm awake. No, you're not. Yes, I am. What'd you say? Huh? What? Until you know the secret, words seem capable of significance. A man laughed at the crowd, and they laughed right back, saying, ha! And double ha! If it weren't for words, we'd have nothing to talk about. Is that just like the majority or what? What and double what? A what? Though unknown to its local inhabitants, all planets have two gods. Well, they're not actually gods, but what the creatures call gods. Anyway, All planets have two gods in charge of seeing that things move forward. And their names, though not published thusly in the phone book, are the polite God and the rude God. Now, even though the beings under their care know not their real names, they certainly sense their presence and usually end up calling them the good God and the bad God. And while this can lead to some curious and confounding conclusions on the creature's part, no impeding harm is done overall. The progress of the planet as a whole will proceed a tempo with only the understanding of individual creatures left unfulfilled. And as always, we end such a story, noting that mystics are the sole exception to the described fate of the collective, and in this instance, leave you with a substantial hint as to the practical basis of the two apparent mystical approaches known as the polite way and the rude way. Men only began to die once they had a mind capable of knowing they were. Gladys, called out George, is that another one of them allegory things? And ever faithful Gladys called back, what'd you say, George? Okay, a second version of an earlier item. The simple feel it their duty to criticize the obvious for being too abstruse. When the cola manufacturer came up with a version with no caffeine, they upped the price. And when they introduced one without any sugar, they raised the price even again. And we can assume when they have one with nothing at all in it, it'll be too expensive for anyone to afford. Now, how long do you expect to sit there and wait for me to point out the similarity of this situation with how life dishes out information? In a kingdom under the sea was once some fish, some of whom believed they could fly if they could but discover the secret. And amongst this group appeared a split, two competing beliefs as to how their goal might be achieved. They became known as the way you can talk about and the one you can't. Long pause right here. Then I continue to read. And as you might note that in the case of a fish, the question of whether his mouth was open or not can be of some serious significance. Perhaps you paused too long between. A certain mystic, looking at his audience, thought, if we're not speaking two different languages, we're thinking in two. Hey, viewer writes, would you repeat again the thing you said about if you don't realize that life itself is alive, nothing ever makes sense, yours, etc.? If you don't realize that life itself is alive, nothing will ever make sense. One sign of simplicity is that you take life personally. Have you had your simplicity today? Go figure, said one guy to the man next to him at the bar of myths. Ordinary people think in circles, yet it never makes them dizzy. The more conscious don't, yet their ideas disorient any of the ordinary who hear them. Go figure. And the man beside him turned and said, huh? Were you talking to me? And under his breath, the first guy muttered, no, Gladys, I wasn't talking to you. Taking the podium, the speaker began with the declaration, the human mind is like a choo-choo train, with all reasonable thoughts hooked together like boxcars. And a voice from the audience interrupted, but what about mystical thought? And the speaker looked puzzled for a moment. Then his face brightened, and he leaned over the podium and asked, by any chance, is your name George? Fashion is always more popular than knowledge, in that the simple, at least, always have their bodies to work with. A lad asked his mystic father, Daddy, what do we have to work with? Life, my boy, life. As he passed a business with a sign in the window that said, come in now and lose 10 pounds of ugly fat immediately, the suddenly frightened man tucked his head safely under his arm and began running. Once upon a time, there was a man who had two parts to his brain, and he decided to name them George and Gladys, until our attorneys contacted him regarding infringement of copyrighted names. Pardon me, said local reality to a man who just showed up, but are you really glad to see me, or is that a subpoena in your pocket? Fingers won't turn loose their grip on a cliff, nor feet jump into a ravine. So how comes man's mind to make such a pitiful ass of itself? And a viewer says, I don't think the punchline matches the rest of the item. Well, I'm sorry, but I will not stoop intellectually low enough to change your own channel for you, so let's just move along. Immediately after the terrorist attack on the city, the mayor made this public declaration. Be it known that we will find the perpetrators of this horrendous deed, and their punishment will be swift, certain, and severe. And if not that, at least well-founded on solid alliteration. In the war of words, never underestimate the physical damage, nor over any verbal.
No.
Perhaps it being immoral and all, I should reread it. In the war of words, never underestimate the physical damage, nor over any verbal. The simple are always pleased to bear bad news. The shift in perception of an awakened awareness results in a dismantling of reality and a rearrangement of sanity. A man asked a mystic, what is the downside of being more conscious? And the wired one replied, ask me sometime not yet arrived.
No.
The simple always feel it necessary and proper to retaliate for mental assaults. Mental assaults. What the hell does that mean? Just as a drunk, when asked his specific plans for the evening, replies that he knows what he'll be doing, he just doesn't know where he'll be doing it, so too might a mystic muse that he knows where he's going, he just doesn't know when he'll get there. Fact time. You can catch a wolf with a trap, a fish with a net, and a man with nothing but words. Hold on there, I say. I realize that sounds weighty and insightful, but I don't believe it's true. I don't think a man in the mental sense can be caught by anything. Well, I'll just be damned. Finally, someone offers a correction. So I was playing. A mystic asked a guy. A mystic told a guy, one way you can help free yourself from entangling feelings about the stupidity of certain individuals is to widen your view and take note of how uniformly stupidity is actually distributed amongst everyone. Creation story update for June 15th. When Yahweh drove Eve and Adam from paradise into the harsh mental world, out on their own, for protection he issued them shoes, but without mentioning the fact that he operated on the basis of one size fits all. Gladys? Yes, George? Honey, I think they just explained something pretty important if I just knew what it was. That's nice, dear. Yes, and finally, so it still continues to go in the land of, I'm alert. No, you're not. Yes, I am. Huh? What'd you say? What? And good night. Well, one more item. After this, one guy had read several books about different mystical paths and their various methods. He concluded that the benefit of fasting must be in the possibility that it'll starve the stupidity right out of your mind. We received, just before the program started, some faxes, or else somebody fooled me. It was something they got out of a cereal box. But with several, seemed to be important items. What if a man, an ordinary average person, could get a wish granted, a serious wish, something that would appear to be impossible? An ordinary average person, dreams of, seems to be driven to some reasonable, discernible degree to get up and move about on the basis that he would love to own a Lamborghini. Not unusual. What if somebody came and gave him, an ordinary average guy, a Lamborghini? Just walked up and said, I knew about it, and here it is, here's the keys, here's the papers, and it's yours. You do know, you're about to, you do know that the wish would not amount to a lot, because an ordinary average man, a person, to begin with, in most states in this union, could not even afford enough insurance to get his tag. He probably couldn't afford the upkeep, but he probably could not. Almost every state, as far as I know now, has some form of required liability insurance tied to the actual registration of the automobile. So I'm telling you something literally. This is not yet the metaphor. This is a fact. Just think about something that you wanted. If you don't like that, use Ferrari or Rolls Royce if you're middle-aged. Stodgy. But somebody comes up and gives you something. It's just almost unbelievable. And they would leave and they just almost disappear, and you want to chase them down and just kiss their hand. I mean, it's just the kind of thing that dreams are made of, that keeps people going in life. Until, again, assuming, now we're talking about an ordinary average guy, he's going to have to do the right thing. So it takes him the next day, he calls all his friends over, but then the next day he calls up his insurance company, so I got a new car, and their state requires you have to have proof of liability. He calls up, he finds out he cannot afford the insurance. He can't afford the upkeep of the car. If he had the insurance, he couldn't afford to put gas in it. Couldn't afford the taxes probably on it. Now think about it. There it sits, his dream. He sits there in his little apartment, his house trailer, mobile home. People keep writing me from mobile home parks complaining. And I know they're not trailers. But think about that. There you sit and you look out. The color, it's everything. A Lamborghini, and it sits there as yours. The guy gave you the bill of sale. You cannot even register this thing. You cannot go out and drive it legally on the street. And there it sits. Does anyone see any similarity between why it is that you can, but now we'll assume many people in and under the sound of my voice have wondered, well, why aren't the kind of things that come out of the great mystical tradition are things that seem really useful and entertaining or just enlightening to me with a small e. And I try to tell my friends about it or my neighbor or somebody, and nobody can hear it. Instead of worrying about specific local anecdotes, consider the story now about getting a wish. And there it is, you have the wish that you thought that if I could ever afford that kind of car, I mean sometime before I'm 60 or something, if I had that kind of car, well, that's what I want in life. That you can see you driving that car on the top down and everything it would entail. Not only the fun, it'd probably take you months to get over just the joy of it, but then how it would affect those of the opposite sex. And there it sits, and you can't even drive it out of the driveway. Does that sound like ordinary humanity's and ordinary minds' ability to deal with extraordinary information? Tied into the fact of, people wish they knew the secret of life. And not just people who are inclined to pursue some mystical dream. How about people in church? How about ordinary, average people? They don't have to be religious fanatics. If you approach them and ask, would you like to know what's going on in life? Would you like to know why you're here? That kind of, whatever they like. Oh, it takes 2 or 3 questions, and they'd latch on to one of them. How would you like to know why you're here? Why would you like to know? Would you like to know why life seems to be out of balance and unfair? Would you like to understand that? Within 2 or 3 questions, they go, yeah, that one, yeah, exactly. And they would have expended some effort, probably money, which is the same thing as effort, but in going to church, buying books, maybe seeking analysis, but at least in religion. They would end up, if ordinary, average people, rather than me having to suggest the answer, using me metaphorically, if we ask humanity, or if you ask someone, what would you, in the intellectual realm, what would be the thing you would wish for? That if you could find God or some secret force, what would you ask? And they tell you. In other words, they ask for a Lamborghini, and you go, okay, and you answer the question. They would be in the same position as the kid, the average person, with a Lamborghini, free and clear, sitting there, and he cannot afford to crank it up. It is absolutely useless other than to sit there and look at it. But if I have to carry the allegory much further, you understand, ordinary average person, how long could he stand to sit there? It might probably take 2 or 3 days for it to finally sink in that I am never going to be able to drive that car. If in some way I came up with insurance, an average person, whatever they're making, $200 a week, and they find out the insurance is going to run $112 a week if they found a company that would let you pay for it weekly. Even if a guy went, I'll do it. I mean, how long is it going to take? It's going to be, what, a month until the rent comes due? He doesn't have enough left, assuming he's fasted. You understand, no matter what he tries, he can never drive that car. He can never execute. He can never enjoy the dream, even though it apparently has been fulfilled, and there it sits. The whole idea of people, and when I say people now, that includes everybody. It's just, well, that is, there's a piece of this, you might say to a relatively altered degree, with even people who can hear a little bit, but they still think, well, any day now, I'll get the answer to the question. Are you sure? But let's go back to ordinary people so that you think we're talking about somebody else. That is the common public's position to take the kind of dreams that they have and just use the kind of dreams that, according to all mythology, there have been these religious prophets, sons of gods, extraordinary people show up on this planet. The story always remembers after the fact, because it never happens while you're alive. But after the fact, you read about now that there are all these figures who showed up, or at least one, if you're an ordinary average person, according to what your religious background is, there's at least the acceptance, the belief that there has been at least one extraordinary figure showed up that knew the secret, whatever reason. He was God's son and that kind of stuff, from some other conscious level, and left this extraordinary message which finally grew into Christianity and Judaism and Buddhism, etc. What good does it do? Now, its general use is to civilize man, to hold a parade together. But insofar as individual information, and people will stand there, ordinary average people again, same kind of people who would dream of a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, and say that the whole reason that they pursue religion, the only reason that they pray, the only reason that they go to church, and they don't have to be very excitable about this, but they will say is that I do want to get something useful out of this, beyond just the simple physical man's hope that he'll live after he dies. If you tried to take it from the physical level of ordinary people and say, well, what do you expect to get? And they would say things like, well, some balm for my anxiety, some soothing of my soul. And all of that is to say that they wish that some of the disturbances of their mind could be pacified. Then they will want to use specific examples because they don't know what that means, and they would almost, without you soliciting it, if they say, well, I wish that some of the disturbance, some of the continuing anxieties I have, I wish it'd go away. And just, you can think about this on your own. Hardly anyone would leave it there. You wouldn't have to say, well, tell me about it. They would just put at least a semicolon, and they go, well, such as me worrying, why did my blessed father die so early? Or why are the children starving? And they will give you a specific example. I said I was going to leave it to you, but there's a reason. They cannot even leave it that open-ended. Like, I wish there was something that would, they used to call it soothe my soul. I wish in some way that the truth of Allah, of Jehovah, of religion, of something would come down and calm me. So I did not live this life of constant intrigue, anxiety, distrust, anger. But they can't leave it there, because you left it there. Not that it's important. They would be opening the door for somebody like an 8th Day Advertisement to show up and knock the likes of a mystic to say, I hear that you were in the, looking for a subscription to what's going on. And they go, oh, no, get off my porch. No. Not if they were suddenly struck that you might actually have a subscription, like, well, I might have a free copy, just a complimentary copy. Here it is. Oh, no. And they'll slam the door on you. They will, faster than they will an ordinary Seventh-day Advertisement. God, that name sounds good. Somebody should start an offshoot of the real one. But for those that are ashamed of the, call yourself a Seventh-day Advertisement. I guess there are funnier ones, so. Back to the simile, the metaphor. Can you see that the information, can you see any connection between a person getting their wish granted and have this automobile given to them that they would never be able to afford, something that costs $400,000, and it's just no way you would ever afford it. Here it is given to you, and you still can't even crank the son of a bitch up. You can get no use out of it, and yet there it is. That does not sound like, what do men used to call it? The truth. I was going to call it something a little, play like we got off that main chorus, the mystical truth. The secret. I keep inferring, if not trying to say it outright, it's not all that new, but to say it in a different way, up to date. The secret is, the idea of it being hidden is almost funny, if it wasn't pathetic for people who really have some degree of real hunger for it, that's hidden somewhere. Because even if that were true, if it were hidden somewhere, and it was like in a book, that great old idea that there is the secret of how to be more conscious or how to know God. The secret of life is written down somewhere, and so people got it. If that was true, and they went, well, you have bitched and you've dreamed about so much, here it is. It'd do the person the same amount of good as it would a guy flipping burgers at Burger Doodle getting a free Lamborghini. The person would be in the same position. They'd be going, all right, here it is. And you hand them a copy, if not the original, at least a copy of the secret. They are literally, I'm telling you, it sounds figurative. Well, it is, talking about it, but they would literally be in the same position as the burger flipper with the free Lamborghini, that there it sits. Because you've got to play a little bit with this, and you've got to assume that they would assume that, yes, that's it. That in some way, whoever gave it to them did enough of the hocus pocus and the prelude to, where they believed, all right, this is it. And the guy put them through all kinds of change. I'm going to give it to you, and I've got to disappear. Don't ever, it's yours. Wait till I leave and then open it. And the guy opens it, and whatever it said, he would end up. Let's assume, I'll go ahead and go this far, that for a day or so, the same way as the average person with the free Lamborghini gift, that they may go around, and they would just be excited. But within the same kind of time length as the guy got struck, that probably 48 hours, that it's going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, for me to ever drive that car. The person, after the excitement of just having it, forget what it says, of just having it, 48 hours, and it's going to be like a piece of paper. It's going to be like this piece of 2,000-pound metal sitting out in the driveway. As I was inferring, it won't take long, and he'll have to get rid of it. He'll sell it. He'll give it away. It's just, it's just junk. It's sitting there, and all it does is irritate me every time I look at it. That's about the good that they would be up to. Now, the other message that came in, the question that came in on the fax just before I came out, it was some kind of news story. The person that tore it off the wire tore off the date line. But it was about a man that had seen, he was looking down and saw a baby possum and saw it kind of moving around. And well, in fact, I think the story was he'd caught it in the trap, and the trap was open, and the possum stayed in there like for a day, and he finally realized, and he tried to poke it out and tried to shake. Anyway, the man was looking at it, and his friend came over, and he says, you know, it just struck me, you know, as cute as it is, it's how dumb a young possum is the very reason, because he just remembered some nature special he'd seen on TV. He went, now that explains why possums, I remember some of the marsupials, but possums have to stay such a long length of time, relatively speaking, with their mama. I mean, that explains it, because when you see how dumb the young possum is and his neighbor. So, well, that may be. And he said, but I don't think you've ever seen how dumb an adult one is. Did I remember that plain enough? Do you understand that one guy is pointing out, with no offense to possums, especially the possum lobby, but he looks, and possums, by reputation, and some of you may know by experience, it is not an ill-founded reputation. Possums have very limited intelligence. They can adapt almost. I'm not even sure their ability. I'm not even sure the word is in their vocabulary. They are just very primitive insofar as brain work. And so this man looks at one, and he sees it, you know, can't even get out of an open trap. Stays in there for a day, and he tries to shake it out, and the possum holds on. But it's a little baby. Let's say, you got to remember it's a little baby for this news item for us to press on and turn it into a metaphor related to a Lamborghini. Watch. You watch me. Don't challenge me. So he says to his neighbor, they're there, and he finally gets the possum out, the little baby possum, it finally walks off. And he says, well, that explains what I'd heard about, relatively speaking. You know, like some birds and other creatures, they hatch, and some large animals, mammals and such, some of them have a very short period of time. Anyway, you know that many creatures, the animal's born and almost on his own. And the mother just is inclined, in many instances, just to walk off in a matter of minutes or hours. Anyway, so the guy said, relative to that sort of thing, now that I see this, I can understand why a creature such as a young possum, a baby possum, must spend so much time with his mama before he leaves, after I see how, no offense, but how dumb he is. And his neighbor said, well, you know, that sounds all right, but it's obvious you've never seen how dumb an adult is. That is, you understand what it does to the situation. Up until then, it sounded like, if I'd been listening to it, you'd think, well, where the hell is this going? What's the point? Does everybody have some experiences, not just young possums, who have very limited, pardon me for saying, intelligence? They do not seem to improve, no offense again to a possum, but they do not seem to expand their intellectual horizons an iota after becoming an adult, after becoming a parent. They don't seem to know any better, because a kid can walk out of a trap and his mama come right along and walk in the trap and do the same thing. And you can have a harder time shaking her out because she's bigger and she'll hold on tighter. And then when you leave, she'll turn around in circles like looking for the way out, and one end's open. So the point is, everyone does know that this has nothing to do with animals. Well, let me just jump right to the driveway. Do you see any connection between the relationship that this little scenario set up, the relationship between that and how life normally dishes out information and lets it go out? Looking at life, skip your own genetic background. Look at life as being our mama, being the father and mother of everyone. And then look at on the basis of intelligence. Now, we're talking about now up here. We're not talking about possums. We all got a bit of possum in us, some of us more than others. But we're now talking about that which distinguishes man from marsupials, and that is the old finger to the forehead thing, brain, intelligence, mind. You know what I meant. I sure hope you did. If not, turn around, and the other end of the trap is open. If you'll just turn around and walk that way, everything will be fine. Maybe we won't have to pick it up and shake it. All right, back to, now you see the story, because there are many examples everywhere. But here it is, that an animal, in this case a possum, it seems to make absolute sense. I mean, it's the kind of thing that you could hear it on a nature show on television, and you might turn around to somebody later, because the first time you hear it, it's the sort of thing that just at an ordinary level is intellectually interesting. To an intellect, it's neither here nor there really, but it's actually more entertaining than most movies or etc. if you enjoy having the intellect stirred, even something little, that there it is, and you just never thought about it. And they have to just stumble on possums or kangaroos or whatever, and the voice on the thing says, and such animal, whatever it is, and they say, compared to others of its ilk, or others, meaning they name some others to compare it to right quick, they say it has a very long childhood. Of course, I don't know whether any of you know it, humans, relatively speaking, have one of the longest, and I ain't talking about your wang, I'm talking about sticking with your mama, that relative to the length of your life. But I didn't want to get off the track, see, I didn't want to get on that. I tried my best not to do that. Back to possums. There it is, you're listening to the nature show, and it can be really interesting. The first time you hear a little something like that, they just point out that compared to many other creatures, a baby possum spends an unusual length of time, relatively speaking, to other animals in that general category, of the time it spends with its mother. And they may even point out that they live fairly solitary lives after they do once leave home, and they don't have any great challenges. In other words, the voice could be saying, it seems a little strange, but it's just one of the things of nature. That relatively speaking, a young possum stays with its mother for a greater length of time than, and they'll name several other animals that seem similar. And you can think, well, that is kind of interesting. I mean, it's a kind of fact, it's just a little thing, but you might find it interesting. Until you think, until you know, well, wait a minute. That all sounds great that, this guy, in this scene that I made up, that I got off the thing, instead of just a nature show, he even takes it a bit further, assuming he had heard such as that. He says, well, now that I see this, without him being offended, or without him trying to be offensive to animals. Let's say he's an animal lover, but he looks down and he says, now, no offense, but when I see how, limited, it's stupid, a possum is, a young possum, a baby, then you understand why he has to spend so long with his mother after birth. I mean, and it seems to make sense, assuming. The only way it makes sense, not just assuming, the only way that sentence makes any sense, and you can believe it, is that you have never, whoever said it, has never seen an adult possum, a mama possum. Because another 3 or 4 years, the ability to produce and to be a mother, a homemaker, does not, by any discernible degree, make a possum any more intelligent. Now, you two guys in this damn story, and plus everybody else, then you're left with going, if you try to use your noodle at all, is to go, well, wait a minute. Does that sound like the relationship, if we go back to calling you a baby possum, that is a man's ordinary mind, nobody in particular, it doesn't matter, but an ordinary mind, call it a baby possum, and local reality, normally known to most people as life, as the mama possum. If anyone's following this and can see it any way other than some sort of attempted critique or making fun of man, look at it this way. If you can put the two together, if you can line them up, then you're left with this possibility. You're left with this glaring fact, if you can see it, that you have about the same relationship now in some way with life. That is, that which seems to be your superior. But now instead of life, which is not directly, instead of me just calling it reality and etc., how about the reality of man, the flock, or whatever they call a herd of possums, if you want to. It surely can't be a pride of possums. If it is, we have debased the currency of the word pride. In fact, I bet some lions would be severely pissed and probably call their attorneys. They found out that possums had appropriated the name of them collectively and call themselves, what is it, George? What are we? We're a pride of possums. That gives a whole new definition. Come to think of stupidity, that you're a possum, which is bad enough, and then you're disciple, I'm proud to be apostle. Of course, that's not true. There's something worse. It's an ordinary person say, yeah, I'm humble and simple. I'm just an ordinary guy, but by God, I'm proud of it. You know, take my word, move a little further down the bar. Move a little further down the planet if you can. Now back to the relationship that I was going to talk about. I brought it up several times in the last few tapings. It is built into the intellectual system of man, where he is tied to everyone else, that no matter what words you like, and I'll give you several, it's sheep. One of the ones recently I did, that a sheep always believes in the superior wisdom of the flock. Now, humans do not go around saying that they believe that humanity as a whole is more intelligent than they are. I cannot, well, you can join in. It's nothing mystical, obscure about it. It's hard to imagine any ordinary human ever having any occasion to ever say that, to ever think it. But operationally, they work on that basis continually, not through their choice. You'd have to be a psychologist or some other fruitcake, some other type profession to have any faith in that. But they operate, everyone operates on the assumption that somebody knows better. The mayor of the city announces, well, here's what will happen. And you will listen, either by TV or in person. Seems to be an improvement to not have to show up and listen to them in person. You are continually, at the ordinary intellectual level, you are continually operating, having no choice, having no knowledge, having no awareness of the fact that you are continually operating on the basis that you're being helped by this mama possum. And the only way that you can believe that there is any validity, any use for that, any benefit is you have never seen for yourself what mama possum is, which I could say that is the awakening. That is the enlightenment in one sense, in one very valid sense. That is knowing the secret. That's one part of it, or one way to look at it. As you look around at what has been running your life here, you never question it. You can't even see it. I can keep up and it's not unstable. I can keep up the comparison. Think back, even though a possum does not have an intellect, but even at the instinctive level, you understand a sane, genetically sound possum, a baby possum, never questions his mama. It's the superior intelligence. I'm using mother now sort of on the basis of a collective herd. But he never questions the collective knowledge of possumdom. But let's say specifically his mother. He follows her around for however many months or years it is, and a possum can never look at his mother get trapped or do something and walk into, head first into a post or something. A baby possum can never criticize. Well, I should have made just a negative. Whatever she does, that he apparently learned something from. Let's go ahead and zoologically give him that. Give possums that there is something that if we were an ordinary zoologist, that they believe that postpartum, after birth, people do get their porches refinished. That is, the animals learn something after birth. All right, well, you know that. Let's just go along with it. That is, that he learns how to go forage. He learns what to eat. He watches his mother, how she will go and try to knock over a garbage can or whatever it is. And so they say that he learned, that he is learning, that he's following around, that is part of not only being protected physically while he's young and vulnerable, but he is instinctively, which will be compared to our intellect, that he is instinctively learning more, enriching his storehouse, learning how to be a possum, learning how to be an adult possum. That all sounds good. Remember my original story. That is until you have ever seen personally an adult possum. Now, back to you and ordinary people. It is without any question, without any awareness, you feel as though you're constantly you're constantly, in a sense, learning, and in a wider sense, you're submitting to the superior intelligence, even without saying it. I understand that. People do not sit at any reasonable middle level of ordinary humanity. They do not sit and listen to the president, let's say, for instance, get up and make some comment about, well, the breakdown of the morality in our country, or how we should do this and that, or all humans, all Americans if we were in America, that all Americans should be saving at least 2% of their page, whatever it is. People do not, I know, sit there at just the mainstream of intellectual life and say, by God, the president said it. They don't necessarily take everything that the president says, any more than they would a pope or a minister or a rabbi, and say, well, yes, well, anything he says is by God is gospel. You know, I got to remember this. Now, I know you don't do that, but you do not understand anything about life. You're not even close to understanding what's going on in life until you realize it's just, how shall I put it politely? Blunt as hell. Obvious as a shit house on fire behind your mansion. Yeah. That you see that what you call your intellect, what you call your normal understanding, your acceptance, your perceptions, your analyzation of what life is about, comes from a mama possum. It comes from the herd. It is, ordinary humans keep smelling this. It's nothing new. I guess one of the latest, there may be some more, but one of the last commonly known was Jung and the idea of a collective subconscious or unconscious mind that affects all of humanity. And it sounds like some sign of, now we're getting somewhere. They changed the name of God. And God, they changed the name of fate. Fate, they changed the name from nature. If you go back that far, right before nature was guys standing around looking at each other and going, what the hell is going on? That was way back, so we won't. In fact, those of you that didn't ever study history, that's known as the way back period. The mind, the intellect, is continually being operated on a basis that will not stand any investigation, which is why when ordinary people decide that they want to investigate it, they have to come to a conclusion that, aha. And the current one has been going on now for several hundred years by that name, or for 100 years, is the unconscious mind. And that seemed to be, back to, and you know I'm not picking on psychology, but that seemed to be, and some of you grew up in the same era that you probably thought you rediscovered it, or you were influenced by it, that it was a breakthrough. I mean, the Freudian, it is looked at as being a high water mark, a benchmark, a change of direction in human thinking that we finally began, although it's a young science, we finally began to get some grasp on why people act like they do. And you think, well, by God, I'm ready to hear it. And you find out, what's their explanation? They go, no, it's not gods and spirits and all that. And you go, well, I was too hip for that anyway. I'd already gotten over that. You've got it now. Put us back, how about 1894 or whenever it was? And they go, yes, we got this. What do you hear? This guy, he's a psychiatrist. He's been trained. He's a medical doctor. He has been investigating. He has done statistical work. Sane, upstanding intellect. You go, yes. And he says, he has now began, it may not be complete, but he has for the first time in human history, after all these thousands of years, he has a real grasp on what it is that makes people act like they do. And if you'd been sitting there then and been fairly in touch, you'd go, Jesus, what a blessing to be alive at this time on this planet. Well, what is it? And so let's say that Freud himself come out and read the paper. So you listen. And when it got through, if they'd had the benefit back then of having a network anchor man reinterpret and explain what he meant and cut it down, what did it amount to? We are not simply driven by our conscious mind, because why would people do things that are not to their benefit? Now, I'm just doing Freud real quick and what he represented. And you're sitting there in the audience, yeah, that's true. Why would people do things? Why would people be stupid? Why would intelligent people be stupid? Well, I don't know. Why would people who are basically good be bad? Why would they suddenly hurt their child or stab their wife? Well, I don't know. The question psychology presents, that is, it's a mama possum and a new guys with a beard and a pipe. But a mama possum presents the question rhetorically, and about to answer it, since you paid to get in and hear her talk. She says, why do humans do things that defy all reason, that show absolutely no possibility of being a benefit to the actor? Why do we do that? Why do we as humans do that? And you go, I don't know. And he says, I'm glad to tell you. And you already know the background. He's an important person. He's done work. He says, it's because we all know our conscious mind. We cannot consciously perceive of why we do these things. Everybody, yeah. I have figured out why. I have the beginning model of why. Well, why? It's because we have an unconscious mind that makes us do it. And people rushed out and wrote stories and it was headlines, and assuming there was not some mystic in the crowd that thought, what? In other words, he's saying, I have the answer of why we're stupid. And everybody goes, why? Now I'm changing the words, I'm just straightening them out. He says, because we have another level of stupidity of which we're not aware. But now you are. And people thought, well, I'll be down. It explains everything, assuming that you don't want any more explained than when you heard it. It explains everything about being a possum, assuming that you're satisfied to be a possum. Because that is all life's going to teach you. If life at the ordinary level, that is local conditions, the intelligence, as I've drawn it, you know, my thing around the general, like a level of atmosphere that runs around the planet, and it runs right through here, and that's the local level of intelligence of everyone. If you're satisfied, you'll stay a possum. But there is no answer, and if you take whatever everyone else is thinking, and not just take it, you can argue with it. I mean, somebody surely stood up when Freud gave it, just using that again as a metaphor, then he stood up and said, here it is, the answer, or the beginning of finally an answer. And he says, we're stupid because there's another level of stupidity that we don't even imagine. Thank you. And everybody, they would just overcome, except, let's say one guy was there and he thought, no. It doesn't explain anything. That man would have never received a free Lamborghini. Everybody else, life can apparently be magnanimous sometimes. They go, all right, here. Nobody sees a connection now between possums, Freud, and a Lamborghini. A free Lamborghini. They're all the same thing. Any information. See, somebody in the audience, not that everybody there was knocked out. What if one guy, still an ordinary guy, not the mystic, but that everyone else heard the explanation of the reason that we're stupid is because we have a level of stupidity that we had never even imagined. And let's say everybody in that audience, reporters, other psychologists and medical men, they were all, save one, went, ooh. And one guy stood up. Now, I'm not talking about a mystic. Just one guy stood up and go, that's bullshit. You could not be more wrong. I've been working on my own model. I'm just not ready to read a paper. But that's not true. I'm telling you people, it's not true. You understand that he is still a possum. You know, it doesn't mean that you have, just because you disagree with what is the intelligence of the flock, just because everybody else goes, bah, and you try to reverse it and go, bah, or however it go in reverse, you realize you're still a sheep. You realize you can stop and complain, wait a minute, Mr. Freud, that doesn't prove a damn thing. In fact, I disagree with it. You're still a possum. It doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree. If you are entertaining, if you take what everyone else is thinking about is to be worthy of agreeing or disagreeing, you're a possum. It is so tricky, it is so right in front of everybody's face, that whatever you think about, to try to disagree with it, you're done for. So my latest hints, if anybody liked it, was the guy had asked the question about to himself, like, well, what is all this? Are you actually trying to gain control of this thing? Or to let it go? It's the same thing. It's the glue way and the grease way. Or, spurred on by your question of last time, it's like the polite way and the rude way. The polite way is always what's available to all psychologists, psychiatrists, medical doctors, and possums, and everyone else. And you can agree with it or you can disagree with it. Think about the guy who stood up, I made my illusionary figure, who stood up out of the whole crowd of those intelligent, circa late 19th century people, 20th century people, and the one guy who disagrees with Freud and said that he's working on a new model. What would his new model be since I brought him up? I can tell you, there's something below the subconscious mind that Freud had just scratched the surface. Do you realize that guy got any hearing? You have to give it a few days and the initial glow of Freud's idea has to kind of wear down. And then this guy showed up. He said, I was there. I've studied his paper now. I read it personally. A month later, 6 months later. And he goes to the press and he says, Freud, I don't mean any offense to the good doctor. I know the man, But he did not go far enough. I mean, the idea, this is a guy giving a press conference to reporters, and he says, the idea of there being below the conscious level a subconscious mind, and as far as that explaining all of our futile, infantile, self-destructive, dare I say it, stupid acts, he said we'll explain by that. He was on the right track. God bless him. He did not go far enough.
No.
And see, this is a guy trying to make his own reputation. He didn't agree with it anyway. He says, the subconscious mind's not it. He'd have to come up with something. What would it be? The basement mind. In other words, there's got to be something lower than that. Yes, and it's higher. It's known as life. It's known as the flock running your intelligence. It's known as, well, I may be a dumb and inexperienced, well, relatively speaking, young possum, but I'm learning every day. Well, real good. Maybe someday you'll be an adult dumb possum. I started to say I resent that, but I happened to glance over in that mirror and I don't know. Did you want me to say a final word about keep those envelopes full of dead, rotted meat coming in?